I never expected to be writing this, let alone sharing it with anyone. But here I am, sitting in my cramped apartment at 3 a.m., staring at my phone screen, shaking with the same terror I felt that night. It's hard to explain what happened, but I know it wasn't a dream. It was real. Every moment, every detail is still fresh in my mind, so I'm going to try to tell this as clearly as I can. It all started with a message from someone on a dating app. At the time, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was just bored, scrolling through profiles on Bumble, trying to kill time. That's when I saw her. Her name was Emily. At first, I thought she looked too good to be true. I know. People always say that, but she had this look about her like she was too perfect. The kind of person you expect to see in a magazine ad. Not someone who would actually talk to someone like me. Her profile was simple, nothing out of the ordinary. Just here for some fun and new experiences. The usual. Her pictures were too perfect, if I'm being honest. The lighting in every photo was soft, almost ethereal, like someone had spent hours making sure she looked flawless. But the thing that really struck me was her eyes. They were just different, deep, dark, like I could drown in them. There was something unsettling about them, even through a screen. I hesitated for a moment, but then I sent her a simple hey. It didn't take long before she responded. Her reply was quick, warm, even. We talked for a bit, exchanged some basic info, where we lived, our interests. She told me she was from Los Angeles, which seemed reasonable. I wasn't looking for anything serious, so I didn't think much of it. But then, out of nowhere, she asked me if I wanted to meet up that night. I remember feeling an odd flutter of excitement mixed with a bit of confusion. Who was this person, and why was she so eager? Of course, I agreed. I mean, who wouldn't? She suggested a quiet, secluded coffee shop in the city that I had never heard of before, but it sounded perfect. It was late, and I knew the place would be empty. I liked the idea of it being quiet, just the two of us. I told myself it would be nice to meet someone face-to-face for a change. Maybe she was just a little adventurous, like me. I should have known better. I drove to the coffee shop, the city lights casting long shadows over the streets as I pulled up to the place. It was tucked away in a corner of the city, far from the usual spots I frequented. The sign outside was dim, almost hidden by the overgrown ivy, and the windows were fogged up. I thought it was a little odd, but I shrugged it off. After all, it was late, and I wasn't expecting anything fancy. I parked my car, checking the time, 11:45 p.m. It wasn't until I got out and walked towards the door that I noticed something else. There was no one else around. No cars, no pedestrians. Nothing. The street was silent. It wasn't like this was a busy part of town, but still it felt off. I told myself it was just late, and I was being paranoid. I was here for a date after all. I opened the door, and the bell above it jingled softly. The moment I stepped inside, a wave of cold air hit me, and I shivered, despite the heat outside. The place was empty, save for one person sitting at a table in the far corner. It was Emily. She was sitting in the shadows, her face partially obscured by the dim lighting. But even in the gloom, I could see those eyes again, those eyes that sent a chill down my spine. They were locked on me the moment I stepped in, unblinking, unwavering. I don't know why, but I felt something cold ripple through me as I walked over to her table. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out a little shaky. She smiled. It wasn't the warm, inviting smile from her pictures. No, this smile was different, colder, more calculated. I sat down across from her, and we exchanged a few polite pleasantries, but something didn't feel right. Her responses were short, her eyes never leaving mine. She was studying me, I realized, as if she was trying to figure me out, or maybe like she was assessing whether I was worth her time. It didn't take long for me to notice the first strange thing. The coffee shop was completely silent. I mean, unnervingly silent. No music playing, no murmurs of other patrons, not even the hum of the espresso machine. It was just us, sitting in that cold room, and every sound I made seemed to echo, like we were the only two people left in the world. "So," she said suddenly, her voice smooth and soft, "do you believe in fate?" I blinked, taken aback. I don't know. I guess I believe that things happen for a reason, sometimes. Why? Her lips curled into that unsettling smile again, and she leaned forward just slightly. What if I told you I had been looking for you for a long time? I chuckled nervously, unsure if she was joking. I mean, I think you might be exaggerating a bit. But her expression didn't change. She was completely serious. And that's when I started to feel the knot tighten in my stomach. There was something too intense about her, too intent. I didn't know how to explain it, but I could feel the walls closing in around me. It wasn't just the quiet. It was her. The way she was looking at me, like she knew something I didn't. Something dark. You don't get it, do you? She continued, her voice low now. I've been looking for someone like you for a very long time, and now, here you are. Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from the back of the shop, breaking the tension for a split second. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. I was about to ask her what that noise was when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. My eyes darted towards the sound, but the room was still empty, except for us. The footsteps grew louder, and my heart began to race. I glanced back at Emily, but she remained eerily calm, her eyes fixed on me as if she were waiting for my next move. The silence that had filled the room seemed to thicken, pressing down on me. It was as though the air itself had frozen. I shifted in my seat, trying to play it off like nothing was happening. Didn't hear anyone come in, I said, my voice a little too high-pitched. Maybe it's just someone cleaning up in the back? But even as the words left my mouth, I didn't believe them. Something about the way she stared at me made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was like she wasn't even concerned by the footsteps, as if this was all part of the plan. I had just started to turn my head back to the door when I saw him. A tall figure emerged from the shadows in the corner of the room. He was dressed all in black, his face obscured by the low brim of a baseball cap. His movements were deliberate and slow, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't recognize him. He wasn't anyone from the coffee shop, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen him somewhere before. I stiffened, my eyes darting between Emily and this man. I didn't want to make a scene, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Something was terribly wrong. The stranger didn't speak as he walked toward our table, his heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor with every step. Emily, however, didn't seem fazed. She didn't even acknowledge him as he stopped beside her chair, standing there without saying a word. Finally, the man spoke, his voice cold and steady. Is he the one? Emily looked up at him, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. Yes, she replied softly. He's the one. At that moment, my mind went into overdrive. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I was in danger. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, but before I could take a step toward the door, the man moved. He was fast, faster than I could have ever expected. Before I knew it, he was blocking my exit. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What the hell is going on here? My voice was shaky, panicked now. I could hear the rapid thumping of my heart in my ears. I wanted to run. I needed to get out of there, but I had no idea what I was dealing with. Emily stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. You don't understand, do you? She said, her voice almost a whisper now. It's too late. You're already part of it. Part of what? The thought hit me like a ton of bricks, and I froze. My mind raced, searching for any explanation, but nothing made sense. I thought about her words, about how she'd said she had been looking for me. My stomach churned with dread as realization began to dawn on me. This wasn't just some casual date. This wasn't just a normal night out. I was trapped. The man stepped closer, his eyes cold and unblinking. You shouldn't have come here, he said, his voice low and almost clinical. Now you belong to us. Suddenly, everything clicked. The coffee shop, the strange silence, the unsettling feeling I had the moment I walked in. It was all part of something bigger, something much darker than I had ever imagined. I turned, my heart hammering in my chest, and tried to push past the man, but he grabbed my arm with terrifying strength. "No," he whispered in my ear, his grip tightening. "It's already done." I fought back, adrenaline coursing through me as I struggled to break free, but I could feel the darkness closing in. Emily's cold gaze locked onto mine, and for the first time, I understood the true meaning of her words. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was never supposed to meet her, and now I was part of whatever twisted game they were playing. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as the man's grip on my arm tightened, his fingers digging into my flesh. I tried to pull away, but his hold was unyielding. Fear gripped my chest, making it hard to breathe. My thoughts were racing a mile a minute, but nothing made sense. Why was this happening? Who were these people? What the hell was their game? Emily stood there, watching me struggle, her expression almost amused. The cold smile didn't leave her lips as she watched me fight against the man. I could feel the panic bubbling up, but I refused to let myself fall apart. I had to get out. I had to find a way out. "You can't escape," the man muttered, his voice a low growl. "It's already too late." I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could, Emily interrupted, her voice calm, almost gentle. "You don't understand, do you? We've been doing this for years. You're just the latest one." She tilted her head, her eyes never leaving mine. "Every person we meet, we lead them here, and then we make them part of something you'll never be able to leave." My heart stopped. Part of something? The words echoed in my mind as I struggled to process what she was saying. I glanced around the room again, trying to make sense of the surreal nightmare unfolding in front of me. The coffee shop, the strange silence, the way everything felt off, like I was walking through a dream that I couldn't wake up from. "Part of what?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound defiant. "What do you want from me?" Emily's smile only grew wider, and she stepped closer to me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We're not just looking for dates, you see. We're looking for souls. People who are open to what we have to offer." I felt a cold chill spread down my spine as I pieced her words together. A sickening realization settled over me. This wasn't some twisted prank. This wasn't a random encounter. This was something far worse. I had walked into a trap, and there was no getting out. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, my voice hoarse now, "but I'm not going to be part of whatever sick thing you're doing." The man behind me chuckled darkly, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "You don't have a choice, kid. No one does." Before I could react, I felt a sharp, burning sensation in my chest. My breath caught in my throat, and I gasped in shock. I looked down, only to see Emily's hand pressed against my chest, her fingers glowing faintly. It wasn't a physical touch. It felt like something was pulling at my very essence, like a force that wasn't human, something that went beyond the physical world. I tried to back away, but I couldn't move. It was as if my body had become completely paralyzed. Panic surged through me as I realized I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I was being drained. My vision blurred, and for a moment, everything went black. And then I saw it. A flash of memories, not my own. I saw the faces of people, countless people, all from different walks of life. All coming into the shop, just like me. All of them drawn by the same pull, the same app, the same false promises. And one by one, they all disappeared. The truth was sinking in. Emily wasn't just a person looking for a date. She wasn't even human. None of them were. They were something else. Something ancient. And now I was part of it. I don't know how long I was out, but when I finally came to, I was on the cold, hard floor of the coffee shop. My body felt weak, like I hadn't moved in hours. My head was pounding, and I could barely focus on what was happening around me. But then I heard Emily's voice. Soft, sweet, almost like a lullaby. "You're awake," she said, her tone unsettlingly calm. "Good." I struggled to sit up, my limbs heavy and sluggish. The man who had been blocking the door was standing near the counter, his back to me. His presence was like a looming shadow in the room, but Emily was the one who had my full attention. She was standing in front of me now, looking down at me with those eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that seemed to pierce into my soul. "You should have known better," she continued, her voice tinged with something almost sad. "You should have known there was a price to pay." My throat was dry, and I could barely speak. What do you want from me?" She smiled again, that same terrifying, eerie smile. "We're looking for new participants. You've been chosen." She knelt down in front of me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind her eyes. A glimmer of something darker, something far older than I could comprehend. "You're part of something bigger now, something you'll never escape." I tried to push myself up, but my body was still stiff, uncooperative. I was exhausted, drained, both physically and mentally. I felt like I'd been through a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. "Why me?" I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Emily stood back up, her hands clasped in front of her, and for the first time, I saw something almost sadistic in her expression. "You matched with me. You opened yourself up to the possibility. You trusted the app." She paused, watching my reaction closely. "You were always meant to be here." Her words were like a punch to the gut. I remembered now, the way her profile had seemed too perfect, the way her eyes had drawn me in from the very first moment. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. I had been chosen, and I hadn't even known it. The man at the counter turned around and stepped toward me. I couldn't make out his face, but there was something about the way he moved, something inhuman, like he wasn't fully there, like he was a shadow and nothing more. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver device. It looked like an old-fashioned key, but there was something wrong about it, the way it glowed faintly in the dim light. "This," he said, his voice like gravel, "is the key to your new life." I recoiled, fear surging through me. "What are you talking about?" Emily walked over to the counter and took the key from the man's outstretched hand. She held it up, studying it for a moment before turning back to me. "It's simple. You made a choice when you swiped right. You accepted the invitation." Her eyes flickered with something cold and dark. "Now you have to pay the price." Before I could respond, she stepped forward and pressed the key to my chest, directly over where I had felt the burn earlier. The moment the metal touched my skin, I felt a searing pain shoot through my body. It was like every nerve in my body was on fire, but it wasn't just physical. It was as if my very soul was being torn from me, pulled through a void I couldn't escape. I screamed, but the sound seemed muffled, distant. The world around me spun, and I saw flashes of faces, those same faces I had seen in the brief glimpses of memories earlier. They were all here, all of them. Their eyes were empty, hollow, and they were staring at me, waiting for me to join them. "Stop!" I shouted, but my voice was weak. "I don't want this." Emily's expression softened, just for a second, as though she almost felt sorry for me. "It's too late," she whispered. "You belong to us now, and so will everyone else you ever meet." The world around me shifted, the walls of the coffee shop warping like they were melting away. My vision blurred, and I felt my body fading. I was no longer in control. I was being pulled into something darker, something ancient. The price had been paid, and now I was one of them. I don't remember when everything went dark again. It was like I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the coffee shop. I wasn't sure where I was, but the air around me felt different, felt heavy, thick, like I was suffocating in something that wasn't air. I tried to move, but I couldn't. It was as though my body was frozen in place, held by some unseen force. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had happened. The key, the pain, the faces, and then I felt it, a cold, overwhelming presence. More than just the man and Emily, more than anything I had experienced before. Something old, something that had been waiting for me, for all of us, something that had always been there. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my throat. Instead, I felt myself being drawn into a new world, a world that was unfamiliar yet strangely familiar. The same people I had seen earlier, the ones who had vanished in my memories, were there too. They were standing around me, their eyes hollow, vacant. Some of them looked like they were in a trance. Others were staring blankly into nothingness. They were the lost ones. The ones who had swiped right, who had made the same mistake I had. And now they were a part of whatever this thing was. Whatever this place was. The faces weren't just memories anymore. They were real. Emily and the man stood before me, their eyes gleaming with something sinister, something that made my skin crawl. They didn't need to say anything, they didn't have to. Their presence alone was enough to communicate everything. The strange energy it had given off. The pull that led me to that coffee shop, to them. It was all part of the ritual. A way to lure in people like me. People who were willing to take the risk, who were curious or lonely enough to believe in the idea of fate, of destiny. But it was never about love or connection. It was about consumption. I was a part of something now. Something that would never let me go. There was no escape. No way back. As I looked around at the others, at their empty eyes and empty souls, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't just me. They were all like me now, and there would be more. More people swiping right, making the same mistake, and getting pulled into the same trap. I could feel the weight of it settling on my chest, the weight of knowing what I had become. And yet, there was a strange, detached calm that came with it. This was my new reality. This was who I was now. I had been chosen just like everyone before me, and I would be part of this endless cycle. A part of the darkness that roamed the shadows, using the app to lure in more souls. New participants every time. I glanced up at Emily one last time. She was smiling that same cold smile, her eyes gleaming with something dark and satisfied. "You'll understand soon," she said, her voice calm and almost comforting. "It's not so bad, really, once you stop fighting." And with that, I understood. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't someone who would escape and tell the story. No, now I was a part of this thing, forever. The cycle would continue, and in a twisted way, I was already looking forward to the next match. The next soul to be lured in. Because once you've swiped right, there's no going back. Did you like these stories? Write in the comments. And please write what you didn't like. It will be useful for me to know your opinion. And I will improve my work. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell so as not to miss new stories. I try for you.